Okay, let's start by clicking this icon up here. It's going to expand out, show you all the different services in Azure. We're going to say create a resource, and let's go to compute. That's where you're going to set up your VM, and just click virtual machine here. Now we're going to be put into the wizard that's going to ask us a few questions. So first thing, I have already created a resource group. Resource group is a simple, logical way to group objects in Azure. Now I'm going to give it a name. Let's call it a SQL VM migrate. The region I'm going to pick is East US2. Now, availability zone, don't worry about this. You can set up your infrastructure in different zones, which would, for high availability reasons, a zone is in a particular region, but it's geographically separated by a few hundred miles. The image here is SQL Server 2017 on Windows Server 2016. That all looks good. Let's leave that. And we're going to, just to save money, pick this 2 vCPU and 4 gig memory VM. It's only $36 a month. Let me add my password here. And it had remembered it from last time, so we're good there. And I'm going to go ahead and disallow port 33. By default, it's giving you the RDP port. Let's say no, and I'll show you another way to get in using Bastion instead of RDP. It's a little more secure. That way you don't get port scanning, looking for an open RDP port. And then definitely click this one if you already own a SQL license. That way you're just paying for the VM and not the actual SQL Server license if you own that. This, we're just going to leave them as premium. You can ignore that. You can leave the default for virtual network if you already have created a virtual network and you want to pick from an existing one, fine. Otherwise, just create a new one, and you can leave all these defaults. I think we're all fine there. We don't need a load balancer, so let's click management. And you know, since this is test only, I'm just going to disable boot diagnostics. And the other thing to pay attention to here is auto shutdown. This is a great feature, a way to save money. I typically change it to the time zone that I'm in so I don't get confused. And I'm just going to say every day at 5 p.m., go ahead and shut down this machine. We don't need to set up Azure Site Recovery or anything like that right now. But as you can see, I'm leaving the automatic OS updates. So it does Windows updates automatically. Click advanced, and there's pretty much nothing here you need to worry about. We're not doing dedicated hosts, so we'll leave that alone. And this is important here. If I was going to be in a production system and have, you know, sensitive data, I'll leave it to be accessed via only a virtual network, but I'm going to say public internet because this is test only, and I'm going to enable SQL authentication. Now, this one might kind of evade your attention if you didn't really look at it, but go ahead and click this change configuration. This is a nice thing to be able to lay out your disks, and this is going to give you some warnings, like if you've picked some high performance P40 disks here and yet your VM doesn't support that, it'll show you. You might have to go up, you know, the size of your VM to support these type of disks. The nice thing about this is it's going to separate your log and your data files if you choose it that way, but I'm just going to say general because this is just for test, and I'm going to bump down the disks to something a little less expensive, and then we'll just leave that the way it is, and we're almost ready. Well, let's see what else. Oh yeah, this is another one you want to click SQL Server license, especially if it's a test environment or if it's production and you already own the license. You can click this and you confirm that you own the license. Automatic backup, you can enable that and give it a time schedule. But let's just keep going here. Click create. We're really close. It's going to validate, make sure you got everything right. And it turned green, so we're okay. If there was any problems, it would turn red and there'd be a little asterisk showing you which section in the wizard had a problem. So now we can just go ahead and click create. So the nice thing about creating a SQL VM in Azure, it's going to already enable what's called a SQL resource provider, and there's a lot of things that are included with a VM deployment of SQL Server, including important security updates to both OS and SQL Server. Automatic database backups are set up. You can also, there's things that help you with always-on availability groups, and maintenance schedules you can set up. So there's a lot of neat things that are provided right out of the box with SQL Server on a VM. Okay, our deployment is complete. So click the Go to Resource button, and here we are in this SQL Server VM. It's up and running. Okay, so you'll notice the public IP address. You can easily copy that and connect to SQL Server later. Of course, you could stop and start it with these buttons up here. And then on the left, under Settings, go to SQL Server Configuration. These are those additional properties that are set up on an Azure VM when you set up SQL on a virtual machine. So click Manage SQL Server Virtual Machine. Some of the neat things that are included here are patching. We already told it to enable this during the wizard setup, but the automatic patching for critical SQL and OS updates is set, and you can pick the maintenance day that you want that done and the duration of that maintenance window. There's also backups. If you just click the automated backup, you're going to be able to pick your retention period, whether you want to encrypt it or not. Do you want to manually set up the backup schedule, which you can do, or just let that be automated? And then also on the left here, you'll see additional features. If you did want things like machine learning services for R and Python, you can enable that. And then this particular VM I set up doesn't qualify for this, but if it was a domain joined VM, it would help you with always-on availability groups. Okay, let's go ahead and try and connect to the SQL Server instance. You can click Overview here, and then at this point, just go ahead and click back to your VM. So now we're back at the VM instead of the actual SQL Server configuration of the VM. Hit Overview, and then you've got your public IP address. Click that, bring up SQL Server Management Studio, connect to the database engine, drop the IP address there, go ahead and give your login, and we are connected. Just give it a second here, and so here it is. So that's out of the box, how to set up SQL Server on a VM, and you see some of the additional features that you get when you do set up SQL Server on a VM. I like to call those, instead of just IaaS, infrastructure as a service, I like to call them IaaS Plus, because you get the additional patching and backups and even always-on availability groups help.